So I began exploring a lot of how could I understand more about that, and in the process, that's what led me to my own healing, as of finding, oh, it's not just about the horse. There's maybe something in me that needs to be healed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Kim McElroy, and Kim has been drawn to horses since childhood, and as soon as she could hold a crayon, this manifested in her art. For more than 30 years, she has been known for her intuitive understanding of the sentient nature of horses and her ability to infuse her art with their spiritual energy. She distills this energy into expressions of the horse's quintessential essence in ways that transcend how they are traditionally defined. Through her incredible mastery of pastels and her talent in writing about her visionary insights, she conveys the power and beauty of the horse's form. Yet more than that, she offers us a timeless glimpse of its soul. In 2000, Kim and her husband Rod created SkyeLandeSea Sanctuary in Washington state, where they provided loving, forever homes to rescue horses and a menagerie of other animals. Their sanctuary is now home to a residential herd of wild but well-fed deer and two capricious house cats. Kim is the co-author and illustrator of the upcoming fall 2024 release, The Council of Horses Oracle Deck and Guidebook, and illustrator and co-creator of Way of the Horse Equine Archetypes and Self-Discovery Card Deck and Guidebook by Linda Kahonov. Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
So lovely to have you. So I just read off your bio. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do with horses?
I'd be delighted. So who I am? Well, most people know me by my art. It's interesting being an artist and having your name be associated with something that people love. So it's like my calling card. And when I even locally, if anyone's ever encountered my art, somehow they remember my name, even if I introduce myself. So it's always fascinating to me. I started out as a child who loved horses and didn't have access to living horses until I was about 8 years old. So my imaginary horses were my companions. And I wanted to be a horse, so I played horse on my hands and knees, and remember getting rug burns on my knees just running around in our house. And it was a blessing in some ways that I think that I didn't have access to horses because my imaginary horses were as real to me in some ways, and I didn't have a worldly um, uh, use of the horse to distract me from who I felt they were. And the short story is that I discovered in my life as an artist, I've wanted to be an artist from the time I could draw, and my parents were very supportive of my work and my way in the world. And so I was guided in many ways to become an artist. But I sort of forgot about horses for a while in my, high school years and early college. But then I was reawakened to their presence in a beautiful experience that allowed me to feel that horses were the way I imagined them to be. And right about that same time, I began learning more about shamanic work and the spirit world. And I'd always been very spiritual, but I began to realize that I could tie in the connection between how I did art and how I envisioned spirit, and they were one and the same. I had never really tied those two things together before that. And then now, as an artist, or as I progressed, I looked back at my earlier drawings and went, oh, that's what I was doing all along, but I didn't really know it at the time. And horses became the catalyst for that, and always have been my muse. So Yeah, that's pretty much who I am. My art led to horses, and horses led to my art.
That is fascinating. So you mentioned that you had imaginary horses as like your companions, and then later you discovered that the way that you would draw them in your art as a child was the way that you saw them in real life time when you first met them. What was your first like encounter with these horses and artwork in a way that you were able to see their spirit come to life on your piece of paper?
Yeah, beautiful question. I think that when I first encountered horses as a child, I it was almost like a rude awakening, and I've told this in other forms of this story because I encountered them at a boarding stable where I was given riding lessons, and that's what you did if you loved horses was you rode them, and and I think certainly I was intrigued by the idea of riding, but when I was enrolled in that, it was more like school, and there were, you know, there were rules, there was things that happened that weren't as much fun. There was peer pressure and other students that knew more than I did, or there was a lot of like um, limitations and boundaries and borders to what I could experience. But the good side of that was once I got through the lessons, quote unquote, then I could, fortunately, was able to find a way to be with the horses when the humans all went home. And I was able to just be with them. And then that was the world I wanted to exist in, except that it was not ideal for them because I could see right away that they were confined to their stalls, and they were um, you know they were not able to be themselves. And at that time, not knowing any better, didn't have the perspective of being able to see how a horse should live, but I just knew, at the age of 8 or so, that this was somehow not the way it should be. And then through time, I would see horses here and there, encountered in different through friends that had horses, but I never could really experience them in the physical body as being who I felt they were in my heart. Um, I didn't know how to be around them in the physical ways that it sort of elicited that kind of feeling. And so then, when I was in my early 20s and I was going to college, I had an experience where I was at a family friend's home, and they had beautiful Arabian horses, and I was always, thought they were beautiful, but they were in their stalls. And then I had this experience where I was trying to sketch them, and my friend was named Geska, my mom's friend, that we'd known them for years. But at this particular moment, she offered to let the horses out into the arena at Liberty, and I didn't even know really what Liberty was. Because I had always ever seen horses leading, on a lead rope or being lunged or being ridden. So in that encounter of standing there with those horses as they twirled around me in total joy, I I knew that this moment was like a quintessential experience that I better pay attention because it was going to pass by really quick. Like it wasn't just oh, this, I could come and experience this anytime. I was there with the horses in a moment where I probably will never feel this way again or have this experience again. So I was really paying attention. And in that paying attention as an artist and having my task of drawing, how am I supposed to draw this? And they're they're spinning around me with their tails up in the air and snorting and being beautiful Arabian horses. And I just started scribbling, and I had learned some techniques called gesture drawing, which allowed me to have the skill to apply to this moment. So I had tools, and I somehow, using those tools, was able to, I guess, channel that experience into um, the essence of the horse in these scribbly lines. And it it really was different. It was complete. I had spent my life up to that point in doing my art in a technique of trying to become an artist who could paint representational imagery that people would recognize and admire and experience and feel. But I had never really understood abstract art. I'd never understood, I never studied really a whole lot of impressionistic. So there wasn't really the parameters for what that was. So for me to create something that was so abstract but identifiable, and that then when I showed it to Geska, uh, and it was her response was so key, because she said, "Oh my gosh, these are really amazing and unique." And I see this one. It looks like, is that Hala? She asked about her horse, and I said, how can you see? It's just a bunch of lines. There were three horses, and how could you tell that one from any other one? And she said, well, it just feels like him. And everything shifted for me, because I had drawn something that was spontaneous and not planned, and somehow I had taken how I felt in the real world, and I had expressed it in a tangible way that was new. And then someone else had looked at it and said, I feel that too. And also she'd recognized her own horse. So all of those things just shifted everything for me. And I realized immediately that there was something here for me. And I have a little picture on my desk here I can show you. This is an example of one of the sketches that I did that day.
Beautiful. That is absolutely gorgeous. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. This one's called Curiosity. And
Wow.
as you can see, and later I'll have it under my website under Curiosity. It's
S-
there's not really an anatomically accurate, form here. There's a horse's face with a wispy mane, and just half of the face and really half of the body, and some lines that look like legs, but it's all in motion, and it's all um you can see the curiosity in his eye, even though it's just a little scribble of a dot.
So much energy in that drawing. Like that energy from that horse is like coming through this in this
Oh.
beautifully orchestrated way. That's incredibly like the way the art is flowing, the way the lines are flowing into this horse's expression and view on life. Like that is powerful.
Thank you
It's
so much.
gorgeous.
Well, I've studied since, uh, because I immediately wanted to know, what is this, and how is this possible that a few lines can convey this kind of expression? And there were two examples in the world that seemed to tie in with it. One was cave paintings, which a lot of people have deep reverence for and such a curiosity about, and the other was Sumi painting. And when I've looked into reading about Sumi painting, I've not studied Sumi painting, but I was fascinated by the descriptions of how these artists that do Sumi painting are uh, they spend a lifetime perfecting a single stroke. Like it's all about channeling the energy of the chi into these lines, and it became apparent to me over the years. I mean, I didn't know this right away, of course, but over the years, as I explored my own work, because I was curious about it, I began learning that what I was doing was attempting to channel that feeling of the horse into these lines, and people respond as if that's happening. So it's also, I changed, originally I called them gesture drawings, and then I renamed them spirit sketches because I realized that, um, or spirit signatures was another word I used, because I felt like it's almost like a form of handwriting. Like, in someone's signature is their, if someone gets their handwriting analyzed, which I did, which was so fascinating, their signature has their personality in it, right? The lines that they form, no matter whether you're an artist or not, the lines we form on paper have energy, whoever we are. And whatever spoken language, written language our human cultures have invented have these potential. So then, as an artist, doing that intentionally in a way to share that language with others that happens to be color and line on paper or canvas or whatever the material is is amazing.
That is fascinating. Do you think in drawing these spirit sketches, these drawings, these horses are channeling like to you what their ways of being are? Do you
I
feel that
do
as you're
feel that
drawing?
way. Yes. And as I have perfected my skill, I have learned to manifest this art in a form that has many visual styles, from this sort of abstract spirit sketch to my more realistic work. But all of it is created with an intent to um, access the energy and the message behind what is being drawn, and a union with it. It's my seeking of a union with it, which I define as spiritual. Of whether I'm painting, and I call it painting, even though my medium is a dry medium of pastel. Whether I'm painting water or clouds or a tree or whatever, or a horse, it's it's this definition of wanting to touch that being or that feeling or that, uh, whether it's an abstract thing like a feeling or a tangible thing like a branch or a cloud. I'm I'm communing with that, the essence of what that is, and I'm asking. It's like a dialogue. I'm saying, how do you feel? What are your somatic um, messages for us? And later in my explorations, in one of my shamanic journeys that I was doing for a series of paintings that I did for horses that were in heaven, I was commissioned to do a painting called Hoofbeats in Heaven for a website called Hoofbeats in Heaven, which was in the early days of the internet, and still is around. Was created to give people a virtual way to light a candle for their loved horse and write a tribute for how they met them and who they were in their life. And it was such a beautiful connection. And the website owner had this particular group of people that she'd grown closer to, and they decided they wanted a group portrait of their horses together in heaven. And I had just begun doing shamanic journeying with the spirits of horses, and I began exploring whether I could somehow meet these horses in their spirit world. And I had such profound visions, and glimpses of clues that they would give me of who they were in that heavenly realm. And it was so comforting to think that there was a horse heaven. And not that I didn't believe that, but it was intriguing that in my visions, at least for that moment in time, they were gathered there like a herd. These horses I was painting among countless others. Um, but my feeling was very clear that um, they were connected because their humans were connected, and so they had connected there in that realm. And I began getting enough of impressions that I got confirmation from the people who were having me paint their horses, that I felt like I was accurate enough to know that there was something going on in that conversation that was true. And one of the journeys that I had in that experience was that I was in this realm of it was like a sandstorm. And while I was there in that sandstorm feeling, I couldn't see anything in my mind's eye, and but I felt a presence. And so I asked the presence, "Can you reveal yourself to me?" And I the it became a feeling of this blowing sand had colors in it, and then the colors started to coalesce, and when they coalesced, they became the line drawings that I had been drawing. And the spirit horses were the line drawings. That was how they showed up in this vision. And it was just, it gives me chills just talking about it, because I felt like they were saying, this is who we are, and this is how you see us and how you draw us. And the sand even was part of that, because to me pastel is almost like, like non-gritty sand. It's like particles. And so it just, all of the message behind that just gave me confirmation that everything I was hoping and questing to do was being given like the nod of approval from the horse consciousness. And
Wow. Oh man, that is just, I feel that. That is powerful. Can you tell us more about how and where your shamanic journey with horses began?
Yeah, I went to a psychic fair here in the Northwest. I live in the Seattle area, and a woman was teaching, how to meet your spirit animal, totem animal. And I was really intrigued by that. I had done some meditation and that kind of thing, but I hadn't ever really had what I would call a vision. Um, and so I took there was just, like an hour workshop or something. And she had a great large audience of, I don't know, probably 100 people. So I was fascinated by, how am I going to have an spiritual experience in this, trade, big event kind of thing, but it happens no matter what, the drumming takes you there. And so I did have my intellectual ideas about that, because I was so drawn to horses. I was like, okay, it better not be a horse, because that would just be too obvious, and I would be making it up. So I was convinced that, let me just remain open. And she was also instructing that, when you ask for your totem animal spirit guide to appear to you, it might not be the animal that that you revere. It might be a dormouse or something, and people have bad judgments about that. It, just receive what you get, and honor any spirit. And so I was remaining open to that. And I was amazed when I began envisioning a cavern of crystals, and then a being showed up, and it was a white-winged horse. And I don't call him Pegasus, because he wasn't the classical mythical form of the Pegasus. He was a white-winged horse. And I didn't know how to dialogue with him or ask him questions, but I just knew that something very deep had happened. And the other thing that I tried to remain impartial about was, I had painted a white-winged horse not long before. And so I was trying really hard to say to myself, this is not my imagination, that I just painted a white-winged horse, so I'm seeing one. But later, through conversing with other spiritual teachers, and doing a lot of spiritual seeking and working with other channelers and healers, I began learning bits and pieces of the story of that being, and my own experiences through journeying with him. And I call him the messenger. He's in the way of the horse deck that I did with Linda Kohanoff.
That painting is powerful.
Thank you. Yes.
Quite so.
And I always say, when I say thank you when somebody compliments me about my art, I really I say it from me and I say it from the horse, because I have my skill and my ability that I've managed to channel, but it's the horse that's speaking through me, and so I say thank you from the messenger, because he's not just for me. He's a guide for others. And what I loved about what I learned about him was that he explained to me, and I'm sure to others who've ever encountered him in the card deck or when they see the art, one of the reasons why we're drawn to horses, and why I personally was drawn to horses, but I think the story reaches out to others in that regard, because he was in a heavenly realm, he is in a heavenly realm, um, and people come to him that are wounded in some form, that need his assistance and guidance and healing. But the reason they're coming to him is because they aren't drawn to the human healers and guides and angels and whoever you want to define there, that they seek out the horse. And in my case, I felt that there was a connection, that he actually invited me to become one with him for a time, and like step into his body and be him, experiencing those people coming to us as the horse. And uh, what an honor and a gift. And it explained to me my lifelong love of horses, and why everyone along the way kept saying, how do you paint horses like this if you've never hardly been around them, much less own one? And I said, it doesn't have anything to do with that, but I don't really know why. So this was the answer to my prayer.
Wow, that is deep. So this other worldly being that takes the form of a horse has been like accompanying you in your work and throughout your journey, as well as many others.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
So I have pulled up this painting, and I did do a good amount of browsing on your website prior to this conversation. In fact, when I first listened to you on Warwick show, I couldn't stop myself just scrolling through your work and being in so much awe, and it's absolutely beautiful and incredible. And the amount of, I don't even know, emotion and positivity and hope in this one piece of art is like, wow, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And
Thank
that
you.
that goes, I think, for all of your pieces as well. Like there's a certain feeling that they all holds that is just, I've never seen art like it before.
Wow. That's so
And
beautiful. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to each and every person who accesses that. I believe is also accessing that part in themselves. So it takes one to know one. It's not namaste, right? It's what I see in the divine in me is the divine in you, and the horse as well. So thank you.
I have a question, Kim, about this particular piece, The Messenger. And it's a beautiful, as she described it, it's a beautiful horse, a white winged horse. But the wings in the background are a beautiful violet color. Um, this has just recently come up for me in a meditation that I stumbled upon just this past week. Saint Germain's Violet Flame. And I'm wondering if you uh, can recall, painting that particular image and if that violet color has any significance in that way for you or about the painting.
Wow, I'll have to look that up. Like most people, I don't know the meaning of things until I look them up. And growing up, there wasn't Google, so you went to the library if you wanted, or you found a spiritual teacher, and so I don't recall why I chose those colors. But they were. I have also since learned, just the connection with the third eye, and how and the the seventh chakra, and all of those things that we're taught. But intuitively, color just comes to me, um, to be chosen. It's sort of like, when you're searching for the right word to describe something, or when you decide you know what you want to surround yourself with in your home, or something. It's a feeling like there's a connection to, this is the right color. And I didn't know at the time the spiritual significance of that color, but I knew that that was how it needed to be. And uh, the thing that's intriguing about the wings, that I thought in retrospect, again, it was an intuitive painting, but um, was that I wasn't drawn in his case to paint the wings as realistic feathered, detail. They're slightly softened and abstract and more like energy wings, and there's light coming from behind them, with rays that are extended out from beyond the points of what would be feathers. And the interesting thing too was that I often use references to get the accuracy of the horse's form, because it's very complicated to draw. And I had found a photograph that emulated to me who this being in my imaginary visionary world was. And um, so that allowed me to see how he could be, what form he should appear. And I later learned that that photograph that I had chosen was a horse that had passed away. So it was interesting that there was that connection too. And it's almost like the horse becomes an avatar for that particular being.
That is fascinating. I can definitely relate to what you were saying about the colors, as when I paint with Willow, we have this whole thing where I'm pretty much like her human helper, and she paints the picture, she picks all of her colors. And I know, like, scientifically, horses don't have the ability to see our full color spectrum, even though even as humans we don't have a large color spectrum. But I noticed that whenever I sit to paint with her, when we're in this space, we're sharing space, and there's a specific energy that I have to every color, just, being a human. And I'll put them in front of her and be like, okay, this is purple, this is red, this is yellow. And this horse will, like, literally think about which colors she wants to put on her canvas. And then she'll go
Absolutely.
and knock it over. And I've experimented with it where I've put, like, multiple different colors in front of her, and then, like, mixed around the one that she'd chosen originally, and she will, like, feel it. She's like, no, I want that one, that's
Right.
what I want. And it's been so fascinating. Like, I feel all that you're saying kind of through Willow in a way, if that makes any sense. She's
Well, we're
like,
all doing that, right? It's like you
yeah,
become Willow, she becomes you, that messenger dialogue that's happening.
yeah. And then being able to, like, decipher these messages. I sincerely believe when she paints, she draws, like, she paints some sort of being. It's either another horse that I've chalked up to being maybe part of her old family since she's wild, or something that she's channeling elsewhere. Like, in a lot of ways, that's what led me to your art, was my connection with Willow and
Mhm.
the art that she's created just by virtue of her existing. And that
That's
also brings me to another point and question. I read through your blog post about where you were talking about how you encourage your clients to show pictures and your paintings
I was
to the
just gonna talk about
horses.
that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I was reading that and my face was just like, I was glowing. So the emotion in even your descriptions about what your clients had to say about those horses and what you had to say about those horses, seeing their portraits, I can't even. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that idea came up to you?
Absolutely. Let me think. The first time I even thought of that, I think I was working with a animal communicator, and she was teaching me some things about how horses perceive, and she encouraged me to show, to talk with my horse and show them a photograph at that time. And I can't remember the specific story, but it was about showing them a photograph. And I remarked on the fact that um, that she touched her nose to the photograph, and it did it. She looked at it, but she also touched her nose, and the communicator said she's feeling the vibration. And I went, oh, because I knew, like you, that there's certain limitations to how horses see and what color or whatever. So I think I started experimenting from there, and I discovered um, that they would not only usually choose to if you showed them a photograph and you showed them one of my works of art, for instance, that they seemed more drawn to the work of art, which I thought was fascinating. And I do believe they also, sense photographs too. And I've talked with people who also have said that they've put up tapestries or paintings in their stalls, or had horse representations, that horses will respond to the image of a horse, like that they will go up to it. And there's a lot of study now about their recognition of human faces, and how they can differentiate from a photograph to like the same human, like if there's an association, which I think is so interesting too. And but when it comes to my own experiences, I've just been really intrigued by the fact that uh, I began realizing that there's an energy to the art, and that they're picking up on that. And so I began asking my clients to show the portraits to their horses if they were still alive, to see what would happen. And it's just the most profound moment was with a horse I dearly loved, who was named Avenger. And his story is a long one, but basically he was such a catalyst for me when I met him. He was a beautiful Arabian stallion, and I was commissioned to paint his portrait by his owners when I was 21 years old. And he was a magnificent creature, and I was so honored to be, commissioned to paint him. And through a very long story, which is featured on my blog, he ended up being abandoned by those same people, unfortunately, at a boarding stable far away. And through a series of events that were totally miraculous, because of the art, a woman found him and brought him home to my actual state. So I was able to be with him again 20 years later. It was just an amazing journey. And when I connected with them over the years, he was getting older and starting to fail in health. And I went to see him, and we were visiting and, hugging him, and just being with him in the very sacred way. And it suddenly occurred to me that this realization that I'd had about horses seeing their own portraits, that I'd never occurred to me to show him the work that I had created for him, that was the beginning of all this amazing journey for him and for me and for his owner. And she had a copy of it on a book cover that I had written, my very first book called From Heart to Art. And so she went and got the book, and we were standing there. We took pictures, and it was just amazing because he was in a little sort of a run out of his stall, and his daughter, who looks a spitting image of him, was right next to in her own run. And we were standing there, and I took out the book, and it was even made even more poignant knowing that he might not be around for much longer. And I showed it to him, and I just said, everything that, that I've done is in part because of who you are and who you have taught me to be. And I showed him the book, and what happens with these horses when they sense these things is there's just this moment of complete stillness, which in a horse is a moment of something going on. and and that it's just it's unmistakable that there's something happening. And what I realized was that he was sensing what was going on with me and with the moment and everything around us. And he just got very still, and he touched his nose to the book, and it was just unmistakable that he had something to receive from that. And so we all just held space for this profound moment of, what is he actually feeling? What are we feeling? And so we just all really gathered there with that sacred moment. And then what was also remarkable was that his daughter was looking over his shoulder and looking at it with a real look on her face, like, something's there. Like she looked at him and looked at the picture. Like it just seemed like she was, she was saying, there's something going on here. And none of us really knew, of course, how to interpret any of that, but it was very clear that they were looking at the art and touching their noses to it. And it was profound for me, of course, and just very tearful moments. And later, the owner of the horse asked an animal communicator, I think it was actually after he passed, she asked many questions, and one of them was, what did he feel when he looked at the art? And she said, he was he was thinking, why are there two of me? And that was astonishing, because as often is the case, you think, well, when you hear something like that from an animal communicator, it's got to be right, because nobody would make that up, right? You wouldn't think of how to say that. But it was the highest compliment to me, because he was saying, that's also me. And that is what I'm attempting to do. So for him to confirm that was the greatest gift.
So this horse saw himself in this painting that you so divinely created of him, and recognized that energy within this piece of art as himself.
Right.
Wow. That is...
It just doesn't get any better than that. I mean, it's not about me. It's just that they would recognize something that had the intent to be paying homage to them, and that they would recognize that was happening and had happened and is still happening. Yeah, it's one of those infinity moments where you can't separate the experience from the message, because it affects everything that is comes before and after that.
It's such an amazing image. And Alyssa and I have talked a lot about our ability as humans and like what comes through on the electromagnetic spectrum. Of course, we're not scientists or anything like that, but we just like to kind of ponder and contemplate some of these ideas. And a critic could possibly look at the picture that he took and said, well, a horse's visual acuity is not right in front of their nose. And, they're not necessarily seeing it with their eyes or something like that. But when I look at this photograph, and of course, I know a thing or two now about horses and their attentiveness, and seeing Avenger and his daughter and how they're connected, and she's actually connecting in energetically with him across the fence line. And I've had so many moments with horses over the past, half decade where those types of situations have existed on a number of different occurrences of things going on in my own life. And uh so he's definitely like seeing it, and whether or not he's seeing the actual image as you created it, he's definitely seeing the energy. And then the way this work of art portrays this horse, and I just want to pull some of that out and encourage our listeners. And of course, we'll link to your blog and all this, and we'll link to this particular image in the show notes. But as I sit here and this is the first time that I've actually looked at this image. As you were talking about it, Alyssa pulled it up on her phone, and I'm blown away. Yet again, it's just another synchronicity. Like the background is in a violet hue, which is it's a very strong color for me just in the past week or two in my own life. And then looking at the boldness and the power, like from the top down, like this horse's eyes are and ears are in this like attentive stance, not fearful, but like this sort of boldness of here I am. Like, and it reminds me of like the Avengers, like we're like the comic, and we're here to defend,
Right, right. I haven't even thought about it.
and this is the power that we bring forth. And then the way you brought out the light from his heart chakra is incredible. And I
Wow.
don't know if you did this on purpose, but when I looked directly, like I see two horses in his heart chakra, and on the left side, as I was looking at the actual photograph of his daughter coming over the fence line while you're showing him this picture, I see this image like in his heart chakra that is, it's
Oh
abstract,
my
but I don't know
gosh.
if,
Is that in the photograph of the 2 of them, or is that in the
in the
painting that
painting that you did
I
of
did of
him,
him?
what I'm seeing in the heart chakra is like I see the image
Wow.
of what would be his daughter in that photograph kind of coming
Oh my
through and
gosh. Oh
connecting
my
with him. Do you see
gosh.
that, Alyssa?
I am got to look at it right now because I didn't, know that was there. Oh
As
my
I put these
goodness.
two and two to
Well, no
put
surprises,
these
right?
together, I was just drawn to that just intuitively. It's fascinating.
That's really quite I see exactly what he's talking
Oh,
about.
yeah, the 2 shapes that are like the darker brown tones. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah,
Or
where the
yeah,
yeah, where the
we'll
really
have to
light
circle it for
areas
people.
actually come together, and yeah, it
Oh
would
my
be like
goodness.
the dark part in the middle of his chest is
Wow.
is is basically like her muzzle. So
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. I'm so touched by that. Thank you for sharing that and observing that, and it's exactly makes perfect sense really because in my one of my very first paintings before Avengers painting, there's a piece called Halcyon that I did in my early beginning, which of course was only like 3 years before I painted this one. And in Halcyon, people began seeing imagery, and I didn't know I had put it there. It was people were seeing it's a very dreamy blue horse that's not even a realistic rendition. It's a very sort of stylized spirit horse. And in the face, people began seeing a wizard and a woman in the forelock and another horse. And I was just like, wow, there's more going on here. And in my spiritual explorations, that made sense to me because I had always been intrigued by this feeling of what's reality and what's spirit and how do the two intersect and how do they shine through when we're not least expecting them. And as a child, I had always loved the Highlights magazine, which is still around, and they had um, a, a drawing in each month or week's issue. I don't know when they came out, which was find these 15 images in this drawing. And from the very beginning, that was just like candy for me. I just loved finding the hidden objects, and people relate to Where's Waldo as a later generation of that. And so I've always had that. So for you to see that in Avengers portrait is just that's just so incredibly. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, and I think it really brings out just this idea that art is a form of energy, which you're well aware of. And whether we call it energy or a light language of sorts, it's music, it's art, it's dance, it's expression. And what Alyssa and I are finding out, what I've been finding out in my own life, is just the horses are so in tune with it.
Yeah, it's like what you were just mentioning with the where's the physical representation, or like where the physical and the spiritual meet. It's like I feel like a horse is where the physical and the spiritual meet, and it's like I don't know. I feel like when I was a young child, I've always been kind of more spiritual to an extent. It's been like not 100% like, looked at by other members in my family or whatever. So it's kind of just been meh. But when I had met the horses, particularly Willow, cuz we had Mocha and then we had Cody before we got Willow. But Willow, when she came to us, like I had mentioned previously, she came to us quite wild, and she had a lot of fear in her eyes. She just lost her family. She'd gone through a lot. I mean, we've talked a good amount about the wild horses here on the podcast, but she was like the shift into Dad and I collectively doing horses differently. So I took Willow, started working with her using positive reinforcement rather than the typical pressure and release. And that's not to say I'm against any of it seemed to work better for me and Willow. And through that whole journey, it was like healing because I got her like just under 2 months after I had lost my first horse, and she had just lost her family months prior. And so we took each other through this like major healing, and it was like it's been such an incredible experience with this mare. And but there's a part of me that every time I'm in her energy, like I feel like she's a mom, and I feel like I feel this connection to her family. And I don't know if I'm, for whatever reason, tuning into what is the collective equine conscious, or if I'm tuning into her energy or our herd as a collective and feeling out their energies. I don't know how to describe it in like human English words, but she does in her paintings. Like she shows me in her paintings how that is. They're such spiritual beings,
Wow.
and it's like, I don't know, it's fascinating seeing your work because it's almost like I feel these horses partnering with you, even if not physically, certainly spiritually, in these works of art, especially in the ones that you've done, like for horses like Avenger and Ella's Transcendence, and a few of your other ones. It's like you could feel the horses' energies in those paintings, even though I've never met them.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that I'm always reminded, and especially with Avengers story, that that people commission me to paint their horses, but it's really the horses that are my clients. Like they're the ones that seek me out, and I felt that way about Avenger, like that we had a contract that was way before our meeting, and that I think all of our profound spiritual connections with beings in whatever form are that way. And um, I'm just fortunate in that I have a bit of a curiosity about tracking that down and figuring that out, because I wanted everything I figure out and define, as you're trying to do with the words, it just goes back into the art and co-creates another way of defining it. And it's been a journey, and my own horses have led me that way too, of my mare Dharma, and my experience that I felt like we were twins at some level I couldn't define. How does that work, that kind of thing. But vision after vision, synchronicity after synchronicity led me to feel that there was another contract, that we had come together, and her very name, which was her given name as a racehorse of being Dharma, was a clue. And so all these clues, it's like detective work. You try to figure out, how does this work? How did this happen?
That's beautiful. So, can you tell us a little bit of just a little bit more about Dharma and who she is as your partner? You'd mentioned you feel like she's your twin.
Yeah.
Curious to hear a bit more about that.
Oh, great. Okay. So, yeah, longer story shorter. So she was a racehorse when I met her. She seemed pretty happy, astonishingly so. Like I thought that she was unusually friendly for a racehorse. When I met her at the backside of a racetrack at Churchill Downs, I was visiting with my friend Glenn, who was an outrider there, and um, we were just walking the backside, looking at and visiting with my coworker, and um, I just saw this beautiful filly and had to walk up to her, and just kept my distance at first, because sometimes racehorses are prone to snapping at you as you walk by. And she immediately was just all ears, all eyes, just so soft. And so I walked up to her, looked around to see if I had permission from somebody. And she immediately, I just felt like I was falling in a deep pool of the most comforting bliss. And I just put my hand out to her, and she put her head down, and then she lifted her head and she nuzzled my hair, and I just started to cry. And I just said, how on earth am I going to fall in love with you? And here you are at a racetrack, and I didn't own horses at the time. This is early in my career. And, there was just immediately and Glenn and my friend CJ were both watching, and they were just intrigued as well, because she was so connected with me immediately. And we went through all the ropes of inquiring about her, and finding out she was a new, filly on the track. She's only 3 years old, injured herself, and is in stall rest right now. And I'm thinking, how in the heck am I gonna, find this racehorse and fall in love with it? And the story of how I embarked on the journey with her is again featured in my blog, so I won't take too long focusing on it. But it was a profound moment, and it led to the awareness that there was a connection, um, and then I had to fly home to Washington while she was in Kentucky, and amazingly, through a series of amazing events, because she was injured, and then she was claimed by a different owner and trainer at a claiming race the next time she ran, and we lost track of her for about a month, and I thought, this is never going to happen. I don't know where she is even. But my friend Glenn tracked her down. My mom was in the hospital with open heart surgery, and it was just one of those life-changing times. And found her at another trainer's. I went out to see her, actually. Fortuitously, I was at an art show there in Kentucky, and this was a completely different encounter because she looked completely depressed. In fact, I didn't even recognize her at the beginning because she had her head completely in the corner. And thinking back, I'm not surprised, because I think she had been, even though being a racehorse was extremely traumatic for her because she was so sensitive, as all horses are. At least she was home in her first time I encountered her. She was home with people she knew and horses she knew, and to be ripped away from that was one of her additional traumas. But when I brought her home and then learned to finally care for her in my totally new experience of being a completely green horse person, and everybody says you're completely crazy because she's a racehorse and you can hardly lead her on a lead line, much less do anything with her, And but she led me to, as horses do, to the awareness that there was more about this conversation than making horses do what we humans think. Even if all our agenda is to care for them, how to even navigate that, and what horses need and what horses perceive. And that led me down the road of animal communicators, and all of that road of that intuitive connection and understanding her perspective, and and finding other horse companions so that she could have a herd. It was all all really for her. It wasn't me going out looking for horses to buy. It was, well, how can she have her security, and how could they have theirs if here's another horse that needs a good home. And so within about 2 years of moving to our farm, we had upwards of 20 animals. So it was horses, llamas, goats, pigs, pot-bellied pigs, and dogs and cats. So it
Were
was
they all
pretty
rescues?
crazy. Yeah, mostly.
Okay.
Some of them, I consider most animals rescues given where they come from. Not all of them were in dire straits, but sometimes just needed, health awareness, or uh, consciousness awareness to bring to their lives, and so that they could live their free selves here. And but in the process of trying to help Dharma heal as a sentient being, and trying to understand her fear and her trauma and her reactivity and her struggles that she continued to manifest, even though she had what I could give her here as the most secure environment in a very peaceful neighborhood with a herd. Her resistance and her fear continued to erupt at times, and it was confusing. So I began exploring a lot of how could I understand more about that, and in the process, that's what led me to my own healing, as of finding, oh, it's not just about the horse. There's maybe something in me that needs to be healed. And when I met Linda Kohanoff and her Eponaquest instructors, and that led to creating the Way of the Horse card deck with Linda, I began realizing that Dharma was really ultimately leading me to my own healing so that I could be a purer channel for the art and everything that I wanted to achieve and release of the whatever was in me of my own inhibitions or things that were holding me back, or my fear or my family history or whatever needed to be healed. And the profound experiences that I had with other horses that weren't my own at events and workshops where I would attend and learn from the horses and the instructors were so profound that I couldn't deny that something majorly deep was going on, and that it all led back to my art as the catalyst and Dharma as the catalyst for revealing, um, like letting go of anything that was holding me back from being more my true self. And in that process and in the synchronicities that began to unfold, I kept encountering hints, and one of them was actually, interestingly, from the Way of the Horse deck. There's a card in there called Desert of Inspiration, and it's a woman that I painted standing in the desert next to the beautiful black Frisian horse, and they're both facing the future of the unknown together. And one of the key phrases that Linda had chosen for that card, it represents Wu Wei, which she calls, it's a term that means not doing. And the other thing it represents is incubation, which we define usually as, in terms of psychology, we would say, allowing something to incubate or form within you, taking the time it needs to reveal that. But this one particular day when I was doing a card reading, I was asking about a lifelong issue that I'd had in my health issue, which was asthma. And and I'd been working with a healer who had been determining that some of my asthmatic uh, symptoms were triggered by my past, which included the fact that I was a premature baby and that I was born at 7 months in the 60s, which was an early time when incubation was something that was a reality, where I had to be in an incubator for a month without human touch. And so physically, from the standpoint of being a preemie, which I later learned is your lungs are not properly developed, and then emotionally to be in the process of grief for not being able to have a mother at that time, there were a lot of layers that needed healed. And when I did the card reading this one day asking about my asthma and about my lungs, this card came up and I saw the word incubation and I went, oh my gosh, that's so confirming everything I've been learning. And then I also began to realize, so I started doing meditation and shamanic journeys about that, and I kept getting these clues that it had something to do with Dharma. And so I did a shamanic journey with a healer present one day and with Dharma present. And and it was just amazing because Dharma was acting differently than she ever did. She was very wound up, and the healer was able to be there with me to keep me safe. So Dharma, was so I didn't have to have my eyes open. And I sat and did a shamanic journey, and she read my energy while we did this healing experience. And I had a vision where I felt that there was this heavenly realm, which it's not really a heavenly realm. It's sort of just more like a spirit realm where all like the horse consciousness is. And I often see it in my mind's eye in many visions. I see it as like a a plain of grass, but there's hillsides and mountains bordering it, and all the hillsides and mountains look like the shapes of horses' heads. And there's this beautiful herd in the valley that gather there. And when I went there in my mind's eye, there was this feeling of um, being there with the horse consciousness, and that there was this voice. There was a particular horse that I greeted there, and there was the voice that just said, "There will be one to go," and then another voice said, "There will be two," and then this feeling that somehow we had intended to incarnate together, but then something went wrong, or wrong, quote unquote, who knows what wrong is, but something happened where we weren't able to stay together and she passed. And I don't know whether that was, in a human womb or a horse womb, or what time frame it was, but there was the separation, and that the very fact of the separation was part of the trauma of missing her, and that we were meant to come together, and that then again, my quest in the journey, of course, I started sobbing, and the healer that was working with me was trying to keep tabs on my energy, because she said, later, that I just went really down in a deep place of grief, and but the thing that held me back from that deep grief was the fact that here I am sitting in the presence of Dharma. So she's here now, and the quest of that path led me back to her, and the reason I found her is because of my art. So all of it comes full circle, and that what we think of as a tragedy is actually a gift, and then it's not just a gift for us, it's a gift for others, and that Dharma's incarnating as a horse was her way of, and her challenging nature and everything she'd been through and her traumas was the way in which I then manifested being able to understand more about that, so I could paint that in my art. And yeah,
That's so fascinating how the horses have such a way, like your journey with Dharma, with this mare that's like a part of you, is so incredibly beautiful and fascinating and healing just listening to it. It's just like there's an incredible amount of power that these beings as horses have, and it's like I don't know, I feel what you're saying about how she came into your life for a reason, and I feel the amount of connection you two share even just as you're explaining it to me. Do you still have Dharma today?
no,
No.
unfortunately, she passed a couple years ago, suddenly, and um, it's amazing because at the time I was working on the co-creation of the Council of Horses Oracle. So it was quite a journey to be creating and writing this book about horse consciousness and healing, and have my mare pass. And actually, my other two remaining horses, Mystico and Laddie, both passed as well shortly after finishing that co-creation. So it's almost like I felt like they were here, to support me in that journey, and once again, the loss of her was another catalyst for the deeper layer of writing and painting for that deck, and I know, without a doubt, that she's still very present, and it was unique to not only, all these years I've been so blessed with the honor of painting people's horses that have mostly crossed over, because that's usually when someone finds me or has a reason to connect with their horse, because they no longer have a tangible way to do so, and the portrait provides them with that beautiful tangible thing that we as humans need. And so really, for the second time, I would say, because I did do a beautiful work of art for the Way of the Horse card deck of her eye that was profound. It was actually her own reflection in her eye, which is another story. But this time around, I and the creation of the wisdom of this deck of the Council of Horses Oracle was intense because I had only a year to create dozens of pieces, and one of which I wanted to do of Dharma and had planned to do something of her. And in the process, it was immediately apparent that it was being informed by this journey that she and I had been on, which was that despite all of the healing, as I said, of the healing path that we'd been on and so many layers of healing, she really had trouble transcending the trauma of being a racehorse and what was recorded in her nervous system and her body, and her psyche and everything that just goes into. And it was so difficult because as she aged, she became more compromised rather than less because of partly her eyesight became challenged, and that began to affect how she could process what was in her world. And so things that previously she might have dismissed as, something that she could understand, she began to react to as a total life-threatening situation, just somebody walking down the road. And so it became absolutely unpredictable and very difficult to have her reacting in such extreme ways, to the point of colic or situations that normally other horses would have not even blinked at. And it was a weekly or every few days kind of event, and for about 3 years. And so her death was so difficult, but at the same time it was such a release for both of us to transcend that fear that she'd undergone, and for her to let go of her body that couldn't interpret the world anymore. And the painting that I did of her is a painting of one of her traumas was that she'd been injured when I met her, and then they ran her again on that fractured knee. So that knee was fused and always gave her problems, but she could gallop and run around and did really well. But over the years, as she got older, she began feeling like she wasn't secure enough to lay down to rest. So for the last 8 or 10 years of her life, she didn't ever really sleep laying down. And she would sleep standing, as horses will, but she also couldn't lock that knee. So she would, sort of start to fall over, and it's like equine narcolepsy, they call it sometimes. And so she never really had REM sleep that whole time. And so what I did in the work of art is I created a portrait of her sleeping, that is, she's sleeping on a lily pad. And the reason for that was because the concept of Dharma that I researched is so many things in Buddhism. It's the way, it's the path. It was Buddha's teachings to his followers of how we should be in the world, and how to deal with the external world. And so it was again, her name was her beingness in the world and her teaching to all of us and me. And and so the lily is another symbol that's very powerful in that kind of philosophy. And so it was kind of sweet because she was a big mare, and to think of her as being on a lily pad it makes either the lily pad's really big or she's really small. And and I wanted to depict her sleeping so that she could finally rest. And
Oh,
so every time I see it, I just think of her as being at peace.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm incredibly sorry for her passing, but I feel like I feel so strongly in not only your work, but with this conversation with you that she's here and she's with you and she's helping to propel everything greater to come.
Yeah.
And I thank you so much for this conversation with us and sharing time and space and a part of your journey with us. It's
It's
been
been
an
a true
honor.
pleasure. Thank you for the beautiful questions, and I'm just really touched by the existence of your podcast as a way for people to explore these concepts. I put this shirt on today, which has these little horses on it.
Oh.
And as I reached for it, I was really touched because I wore this shirt in 2007 when I was interviewed for one of the first documentaries on this kind of conversation, which was called "The Path of the Horse" by Stormy May. And it was the year I was co-creating the Way of the Horse with Linda Kohanov, and I thought, gosh, this is amazing. Not only that I have this shirt still, right? It's a special shirt. But also at that point in 2007, I had been doing my work for 20 years, and it's still astonishing to me because that was 2007, and now it's almost 40 years. And so Linda is one of those gurus of the equine consciousness that walked that path at about the same time I did, where the Tao of Equus came out, and it was you know a quantum shift in how people started to view horses. And now to have podcasts like yours of a beautiful father-daughter team that are talking about this is and the fact that there are people listening is still a miracle to me. So I'm so glad you're here to open hearts and minds to the horse.
Thank you. We love sharing it with everyone. We love connecting with new people. It's like it's like our herd. We're connecting with our quantum herd.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to point out, as you were closing up that story about Dharma, and we were right at 1 hour and 11 minutes. And so I
Oh, yes. That's that's really meaningful.
know a lot of people might not get the synchronicity of that, but just here recently in the past week or two, numbers and numerology has been really, really powerful in our lives. And 11, just kind of like speaking to your own spiritual journey. And, to me, and just feeling the energy about that whole story of Dharma, and even her name, which, as I understand it, was her name before you got in touch with her. So just that whole, I'm sure plenty of people will appreciate that little added tidbit of synchronicity. And Alyssa, I know you are.
Yeah, she's beaming right now.
It's a bit of a synchronicity. I'm not going to go into that now. But yeah, it's been an incredible time talking with you, an incredible story that you have and your work. I'm absolutely blown away by your work, and just this conversation today has been incredible. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing this with us.
And we will put out links to your, if you just want to give a shout out verbally, where people can find you at.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. My website is spiritofhorse.com, and I also have Spirit of Horse cards, which are e-cards, which are really fun with my art and writing, and musical e-cards you can send as horse greetings to your loved ones. And Yeah, and then the books that I've been involved in is The Way of the Horse, which is in your bio, and the Council of Horses will be coming out. The Council of Horses Oracle will be coming out in this fall of October 24. So that's a huge, huge dream that's really coming to tangible fruition. So appreciate your support for that. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. I'm blown away by it. So thank you for sharing and continuing that on.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for being with us.
It's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.